Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to be making some cool 3D art. So we're going to be brushing up on some 3D skills. We're going to be brushing up on some Photoshop skills. These are great things to know in terms of making videos. And of course, we're video focused, so I'm going to try and apply it in that way. But we're going to teach you a lot of awesome stuff within this video. I'm going to be using Cinema 4D. Let's go ahead and fire that up. If you don't have C4D, it's fine. You guys can follow along in something like Blender, which is free. Some helpful links will be down below as usual. We're going to hop right into this tutorial. So starting from scratch, I'm going to show you how to get the 3D model, set it up, do the lighting, do the texturing, etc., bring it into Photoshop, and then do all the post work and get that cool little 70s vibe that I did in that post that you just saw. As always, before we start, if you guys are new here, consider subscribing, joining the community, leave a like, comment, subscribe if you do enjoy to help the growth of the channel. Let's get right into this. Okay, so I resized my little camera here, and let's get started. So let's bring up a little reference so we can check out what we're going to be making here. So just as a breakdown, I mixed together two 3D models here. We're going to make a really cool texture which you can get this nice, awesome reflectivity, and a lot of the color I did in Photoshop. I'll show you what this actually looked like coming straight out of the renderer from Cinema 4D. This is actually what it looked like before any Photoshop work. Pretty cool. So this is what the texture material looks like beforehand, and let's go ahead and set this all up. So in terms of the actual 3D model that I used here, I grabbed this from turbosquid.com. I made a video talking about the best place to get free 3D models, and this site was one of them. So if you want to use the exact same model, you can. I'll leave the link below. It is for free. You guys can download it. It's called Female Sci-Fi Bust. Of course, there's a bunch of other awesome models out there that you can use if you want to switch it up, be original. So go ahead and download that, and then we're going to hop back into your own 3D software, whatever you are using. Like I said, I'll be using C4D, and we're going to go to File, Merge Objects, and we're just going to bring in the OBJ, FBX, whatever it is you downloaded for your actual model. Okay, so go ahead and merge in that object. You might get all these little group polygon objects right here. What you can do is hold Shift, click to select them all, and then click Alt-G just to put them in a null little placeholder. So you can bring this open, and then you can drag the null, and it selects all the geometry just like that. So that's pretty easy. I'm going to rename that to Robot Face. And now we're going to go ahead and start lighting this, which is going to look pretty cool. Now what I'm going to do for this, which I use in a bunch of my C4D videos, is I'm going to use this Octane plugin, which gives you this live viewer window, and plus you can make some really awesome textures, and it's an awesome renderer as well. So I'm going to fire up this Octane live viewer window. I'll also link below just the Octane plugin itself if you're interested and you want to learn more on that. So here's what this looks like in the Octane renderer, looking pretty cool. Let's work on our lighting setup first. So what we can do is we can click on Objects and go to Lights, and then bring in an Octane area light, and that's going to bring that in all the way over here. But first, to actually see this light affecting, it's a little bit too bright here. We're going to go ahead and click Objects again, and then we're going to bring in an HDRI environment just so it makes it all dark. Now we can grab our Octane light, position this, bring it up a bit, and then you'll see how this lighting is actually affecting our model. So you can resize this light if you'd like. If you don't want to see it in your renderer, you can also click on the little light tag here, go to visibility, and then just check off camera visibility so that it's invisible. And I'm just going to get a little 3-point lighting setup going on here. So I'm going to select my light, Control C, Control V just to copy and paste that. And then I'm going to actually just drag that over, use my rotation tool, and point it as such. I'm going to change around the lighting a little bit later. Let's just try and get a basic little setup here. If you want, there's also a lot of 3D studio packages which you can pick up for Octane, which will put in some actual studio lighting, as well as these nice white cyclones or green cyclones, blue cyclones, whatever you want to create. So that's great for creating these more like product shoot type things, but this is just going to be a rough little lighting setup. I figured I mentioned it. I'll leave a link below if you really want to get into setting nice lighting up for this. Let's go ahead with one more little overhead to get some nice dramatic lighting. We'll point this down. So now let's zoom back in if you guys want. If it's a little bit too bright, you can select these light tags, click on light settings, and you can just drop the power by using these sliders to create some nice shadows here. Now let's go ahead and set about our texture, which we're going to be using. And I mentioned this is a pretty awesome texture. It's an Octane texture, but basically what we're creating is an oil slick texture. I was inspired to create something similar to this because of the Lil Nas X visualizers that came out recently by FVCK Render, Fuck Render, however his name is pronounced. He creates daily renders. He creates some really awesome textures. He has a Patreon as well promoting his stuff, so check him out on Instagram. This texture is going to be inspired by that sort of look, but I wanted to change it around so that it wasn't just a direct ripoff of how the actual texture is. So you're going to get that cool oil slick reflectivity. You're going to get this nice film layer, but if you want to change around, I'm going to show you how to change the settings to get your own unique colors and looks. So let's start off by going to create, and we're going to go over to shader. And I actually have it made beforehand here. I can just drag and drop if you want to see what that looks like. And I actually dragged it only onto the chest, which is why it looks weird. So you can just drag it onto all of these, and you get some really crazy reflective colors going on here, which is pretty sick. So let's step back for a second. Let's create this from scratch. We're going to go to create. We're going to go to shader, and we're going to go to C4D octane material. And then in this new octane material, we'll double click to load it up. First things first, we want to change this from diffuse or glossy to a specular material, which will give it this nice transparent kind of glass look. And if you want, you can apply it onto our model here. You can just shift, select, and then right click on the material and apply it to see what we're actually doing. And as we make changes, we'll be able to see a little bit of the difference. So right now, basically just see-through glass. Let's go ahead and switch it up a little bit. We're going to go over to our roughness. We're going to want to bump that up a bit. The more roughness you bump up, the more kind of cloudy and solid this becomes. So now it looks more like cloudy glass, kind of like chess pieces. We can reduce that to the point where we have a nice mixture of transparency, but still solid color. So I think this is okay, around 0.007. Next, what we want to do is let's go down to our film layer. And here's where we can create a lot of this cool color. What we want to do is this film IOR, we want to keep this around 1.2. You can bump that up and you're going to see the magic start to work. So here's where you really can get creative with it and create some different kind of colors and looks. If you just mess around with the float, like I said, keep the film IOR relatively low. If you start bumping that up, it'll start to become more solid, kind of like this. And you can play around with it, but I find if you really want to get that nice mixture, that nice oil slick look, then it's nice to stick around this. Also, what I'm going to do, or what I am doing, is I clicked on my Octane settings and I changed them from direct lighting to path tracing, just so there's a little bit less fireflies and we can actually load this up a bit. I changed my max samples to 4,000, and then I'm also going to make my GI clamp 1 or 0. This is just kind of a graphics card thing that should help a little bit, and that is fine for now. So this is looking pretty cool so far, a little bit too dark. Let's click back in here, and like I said, if you lower the film IOR, you're going to get some different looks in terms of the color mixtures. This one is a really cool, nice dark purple, so if you want to copy this exactly, just pause the video and just copy these little values that you saw. And like I said, the only thing I changed, I made it specular, put the roughness up a bit, and then messed around with my film layer, which is just the film IRR and the film float width, whatever you want to say. And that's about it. You guys can mess around more. You can get a nice golden look with this 0.05. This is what I really love about this texture, is you can change it a lot and get really different looking stuff. So let's go back into our lights and let's bump up the power a bit, so we can see what this is really doing for us a bit more. And the lighting is really going to make a huge difference on how this is reflecting. If you bump up this top light, you're really going to see these colors start to reflect more, and vice versa. So I bumped my light up a little bit more, and now it's starting to look a bit solid. So to combat that, let's go back in here and let's go to our roughness again and maybe drop that a tiny bit. Alright, now another thing you can do if you're planning on creating some sort of colorful background like how I did in my original, what I did was I actually went to objects and I added a little texture environment. So we can click on this texture environment on the little tag here, and you'll see it just adds a little RGB spectrum. So for example, I knew I wanted a red background to work with in Photoshop, so you can click here and then work off that. Now this looks really bad with this, obviously, so you're gonna have to go back in and adjust accordingly. You can play around, add a little RGB spectrum, like I said, if you do want that background, but keep in mind you're going to always have to be updating the texture to really account for that. I think in terms of what I did with these settings, I think that just having a dark background is pretty cool. You get this awesome, crazy looking mixture and blends of color, and of course your lighting setup is going to change how it looks every time, so you're not going to be able to perfectly recreate this unless you have the exact same lighting setup that I have here. Now to save this little camera position here, what I'm going to do is just go to objects, bring in an Octane camera, And then you can click this little selector button here just to lock that camera in place. And if we click on our camera tag, you guys can go over to camera imager, check that on, and then come over to post-processing, check that on as well. Now, if we go over to our camera imager, what we can do is you can mess around with the exposure a bit just to maybe even things out. You guys can even add your own custom LUT, which is awesome if you're planning on doing some different color work, or you can just do that all in the Photoshop part, which I'm going to show you after. Now, another awesome thing I want to show you in terms of the texturing is adding in some emissive materials to really make these different parts of the robot pop. So with this particular model and a lot of models that you may get, these different these different groups are representing different parts of the actual geometry here. So if I select here, it's just selecting these rims around the eyes. I select this 31742, it's selecting all these little buttons which are in between here. So we can really mix and match this and create some different cool materials to make these buttons glow, which is really sick. So let's go ahead and create an octane emissive material just to make those lights glow. So we're going to go to create. We're going to go to shader, C4D octane, and then we're going to click octane material. Open up that octane material by double clicking it. And the only thing we really have to do is just go to emission, click black body emission, and then it's going to create this white light for us, which we can now take and drag onto the group, which has these little circles, and you'll see it automatically just lights it up. Now to balance this out, let's click on the black body emission. So just click here, and then you can change the power, lower it or make it higher. Now to combat this, you're going to want to kind of relate this power slider with your options in your camera imager. So click on your camera tag, and the reason why we're doing that is if you click on post processing, this is what really affects the glow that's going to come off of here. So I think that this is a little bit too overwhelming in terms of power. We'll lower this a bit, and maybe let's add some color. So we can either drop temperature by going like this and get some nice like red glows, which is pretty sick. If this starts to get a little bit too reflective and maybe transparent where it's starting to distort the face and you can't really make out the facial features all too well, what I recommend doing is click off your Octane camera so that you snap out of it, but the camera is still locked into place, and grab these lights that you have going on here and just make them a little bit wider. Originally I had them around this size. If you just make them a little bit wider, just kind of distribute the light a little bit better, then things will start to have a more solid look. And also you really need to pay attention to the lighting because, like I said, the lighting is going to affect how this ultimately is going to look. And if you want to look back at my original project file, this is for the original piece that I made. Here's the lighting setup for that. I'll click off my camera, and here is the lighting setup for that. So I had this giant kind of over top light. I don't think this one's activated. And then we have a little backlight here kind of over the shoulder, and then one up in the face. You can go ahead and try that if you want to really replicate this exact type of look in terms of the lighting. Let's maybe try that with this. So instead of having that here, we're going to go ahead and put this behind the shoulder of our subject, and then we'll make this one a little bit more straight on, and then we'll try and distribute this top light a little bit better. And now you guys can see that the details of the face are just a little bit more defined. You can see more of the shape of the nose. You can see the shape of the ear. It's not more kind of in your face. Now with the texture we chose for this in particular, it is a very, very reflective, so it is very kind of thrown around, but I actually really like the look of the colors and just all these reflections. So if you do want to bring out more, like I said, mess around with the lighting, copy that lighting setup that I just showed you with the little behind the shoulder reflections going on. And just to really hammer home the importance of the lighting in this situation, if I just turn off my front facing light, you're going to get a completely different look. So like I said, lighting, shadows, you can use this little perspective view with just the model as a reference. You can really see the shadows better here. But if you click on here, and if you don't like the look that you're getting here, just pay attention to the shadows and lower or raise the sliders accordingly until you get the look that you ultimately want. And I think this is okay for now. Now I'm going to do one more little thing. I'm going to go ahead and add in one more little model here. So I'm going to go to my 3D objects folder, and I'm going to open up these goggles. And I really like these goggles. You can add them to a lot of things, and I think it's just kind of like a little personal style thing that I like adding on. So I'm going to do the same thing. file save as always. And now we're going to apply a similar texture onto our goggles. What I like to do is I just selected my original texture I made for the character, Control C, Control V, and then we can go ahead and apply that onto the goggles. And if you want, you can just keep it all the same as the other stuff. If it doesn't apply, what you need to do is actually do the same thing. So hold down Shift, select all of these, right click on the texture, and then click apply. And if you don't like it blending in with the character that much, you can double click on this duplication we made and maybe just change around some of these settings. So I like to add more roughness. So we click on roughness, bump up the float, and you get this kind of fogged goggles look, which I really love a lot. And we can go into the film layer again, and we can change around any of these until we get something we like. So that's pretty cool. You get these kind of pink outlines, and that is great. So I'll wait for this to give me a nice render preview so that I can decide whether I want to move forward, but that is the basics of it. So you find your model, you can use a free one or a paid one, or you can create your own, whatever you like to do in terms of that. Creating the texture is very, very easy. You just create an octane specular, and then you change around your roughness to make it more cloudy or more see-through, glass-like, and then you just go to your film layer, keep it relatively around 1 for the film IOR, and then for the float, you can mess around with that to get different looks. Also just rotated the camera a tiny bit just so you can see a little bit more perspective, which I think helps. So this is ready to render. We're ready to bring this into Photoshop for part 2 of the tutorial. Let's go over to our render settings, so this is very important, and automatically we're going to want to make this 1800 by 1800 because that's our Instagram size. The good thing about the size of 1800 by 1800 is it's pretty square, so it doesn't mess up the perspective at all, which is nice. You might have to zoom in a little bit or fix some quick things. Current frame is good because we're not making an animation. We're just going to render out this frame. In terms of save, this is where we can figure out where we want to save it. You can choose TIFF PSD layers if you would like. PSD obviously just stands for Photoshop, or you can create PNGs, JPEGs, whatever you want. Let's go ahead and just make this a TIFF PSD layer, and then we're going to click these 3 little dots here. And then what I recommend is you create a folder. So I created a folder called Robot Art Piece, and then I went into, and then you can just make a file name. So I'll just name this 3, click save. Now, one more thing before we do this, another little added tip. If you want to add some more crazy reflectivity, you can actually load in an HDRI environment here again. So for this normal octane sky, it's just an image texture with this dark here. If you want, what you can do is you can go over to our objects HDRI environment, click on here for this image texture, click the 3 dots, and we can load in an actual HDRI HDRI file here, and I'm gonna leave a link. TFM Styles website has some great free Manhattan Nights HDRIs which you can load in. So let's load in a little Times Square one. Click yes, and that's always going to change around the reflectivity. So if you want to experiment with that, then try it out. You're going to get different looks. Again, I just figured I mention it because it's something that's going to change the look, and I might as well throw it in there as an option. So that was an option. I'm actually going to turn that off because I just like how it looks better with the dark. And we're going to actually finesse the background in Photoshop. So this is ready to render. Once you've done that, like I said, go back to your settings. We did our output, which is 1800 current frame. We made our save. Another big one, make your renderer whatever renderer you use. So if you use Octane to create those materials, set it on Octane render, and then you're ready to go. So now you can just go ahead and click here. It's going to fire up, and then actually it's going to fire up and render that on out for us. And once this is done rendering, we're going to hop over into Photoshop, and then we're going to put together this crazy 70s stuff. We're going to mess with some color stuff, some LUT stuff, mess around with the shadows, the looks, the background, bunch of awesome things coming in the Photoshop part of the tutorial as well. Okay guys, so our render is done. A little bit overexposed. If this wasn't a tutorial, I'd probably go back, fix the lighting a bit more just to make it perfect. Really love the reflections here, really love all this. One great tip I really want to give you guys is you don't have to make the most perfect thing coming out of the 3D software. That's what you have Postwork for. That's what you have After Effects. That's what you have Adobe Photoshop for, to really refine those edges and put those finishing touches on. What you really need to focus on is just getting the perfect basic structure of what you can work off of. So don't worry if it's not the most perfect in your eyes yet. Just make sure you have something really nice to work off of, like for example some nice reflectivity, a nice look that you can build off of in terms of color, in terms of other things in post. Also, before we hop into Photoshop, I want to mention quick little wardrobe change here. I recently realized that you can attach Teespring accounts onto your YouTube watch pages, which is pretty cool. So underneath this video you may see some designs, merch, hoodies, coffee cups, stickers. There's some cool stuff. Got some simple little designs here. This is just stuff that I make on Instagram, and I've just been putting it on Teespring. So if you guys want to grab it, it's up to you. Like I said, it's pretty unofficial. It's basically just been a hobby. I like being able to put things that I make onto clothes. I might put some cool robot stuff onto clothing. So if you're interested, check it out. If not, it's all good. Let's hop right into Photoshop and finish this all up. And we're going to show you a lot of really cool stuff within Photoshop. Photoshop should be one of the first softwares you learn. Even if you're doing only video, Photoshop is a must in my opinion. You can do so much with Photoshop, and it can help you so much in terms of video in general as well. So we're going to create a new little project here, same height and width, 1800 by 1800. Click OK. And now we're going to go to find that save folder where we saved our render from Cinema 4D or whatever 3D software you guys are working out of. So here's number 3, drop that on there, it should fit in perfectly, and that's looking pretty nice. Now, first off, what we're going to want to do is, let's go ahead and try and just do some basic color correction. So this is a little bit overexposed, like I said. You should fix that in the 3D software. You shouldn't be coming in with this kind of light rays coming in here. So if I had more time, if it wasn't a tutorial, I'd go back, redo the render. But we can fix it in the meantime if you do have some issues by showing you this. So select your clip, click this little adjustments. You can also click here and then go to brightness and contrast. Now you're also going to want to click this little button here, and that's basically just going to make sure that all of these effects only affect the layer below. So now we can select this brightness and contrast, maybe just change it around and see what we're working with. Adding some more contrast really makes those deep purples pop a lot, so that's really cool. Alternatively, you can also do a curves effect here. Let's resize this panel. So curves, what you can do is you can really take every part of you can really take a lot of parts such as the shadows and the highlights and change them in this curve format. Now hue saturation, for this you can do a lot of awesome stuff, because changing this you're just going to get some really cool colors, and that's what I really love about this texture. It's just so reflective, it's just really amazing, beautiful color. So mess around with that. Saturation, you can bump that up a tiny bit if you want, or maybe even a more desaturated kind of look, so really up to you. I'll kind of go for in the middle here. Lightness we can leave the same. Now let me show you how to change the background, and then we're going to show you some cool effects that we can apply onto our subject, and then we're going to add some finishing stuff like those cool 70s looks. So in terms of the background, pretty simple. What we're going to want to do first is isolate our subject from the background. So we're going to use a little pen tool. So just click here or press G on your keyboard. And then what we can do is just draw a mask around our subject. And it's same as in Premiere or After Effects. If you click and hold, you can bend these lines, which you really need to get used to if you're doing any kind of video editing, photo editing. Learning how to mask properly is very essential. So we connected our mask. We're going to right click here and just make a selection, and we can feather the radius at 3 just so we kind of have a soft mask. Now with that selected, just press Control J, and what we did here was we just isolated the subject from the background. So now we have one of just our subject, and then of course we have our normal one. So with our isolated subject here, what you can do is even Control J and maybe hide this layer. And my apologies, I was actually blocking that the whole time, so let me fix that for you guys. Okay, so let's go ahead and hold down Control and then select our isolated subject layer. Now we can do some really cool stuff. So let's go up to Filters, and let's go to Filter Gallery. Now at this point, what you guys can do is you can just look up a bunch of crazy tutorials on Photoshop, or you can just follow along, because I'm basically just going to be experimenting here. There's a bunch of really cool looks that you can add onto just by going through this filter gallery. So artistic, you can go for a really cool more like hand-drawn type of look, like this cross-hatching I think looks pretty cool. Distort, we're going to leave that away. In my original, you'll see that I also added this little halftone pattern onto my final thing. So let's go back. So here is a little look at what my final thing was. I added some little cartoon effects, which I'm going to show you. I added this nice cross tone, and then I did a bunch to change around the actual colors. This is what the original color actually looked like out of C4D. You can even try this cutout look, which is kind of like pop art, which is pretty sick. So anything that you really want to do, you can mess around. You can maybe even put it on like different color blending modes just by changing this little drop down here, and you can mix together, get some really just insane creative looks. There's this, maybe lower the opacity. Here's what that looks like. In terms of the background, since we already have this subject cut out from the background, which is great, you don't have to look any further. Now, my inspiration for the background, I really love, if you just look up Cyberpunk art, I love these kind of like pop art style of just this cool red, orange, pink tones with this really kind of contrasty subject and glowing. So I really love that. That was my inspiration for a lot of this. I think this color is really cool. So usually what I'll do is I'll find a nice color that I like. I think this green color is also pretty cool. Maybe we'll use this one with this nice kind of palish color. So we'll right click, copy it, and then we'll paste it here just so we can get the color. And make sure, as you can see, there's a little difference in the colors here. That's because this is below these little adjustment layers, this brightness, contrast, hue. Drag that above so you can get that original color. And then take your color selector, just drop it on that so we can steal that color from that image. And then you can click on these three dots or right click and then just find wherever your paint bucket tool is. And we can actually just create a new layer. So by clicking this little page here and just fill it in with that color. Now, since this kind of messes around with the opacity, as you can see, it's on 48, you're going to get this kind of blended look. So what you can do is you can put this underneath your adjustment layer that has the cartoony effects, and you can change around some of the blending modes and maybe get some cool looks like that. Or it even changes around the colors, which is pretty sick. I put mine on pin light and just lowered it. And of course, if you don't want to change any blending modes, if you just want a nice solid background, if you don't want that pink color, let's try another background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge these two layers so this stays the same. And then since we have this old thing saved here, we can just control click to get that selection of just our subject. And then I'll control J just to bring that back. So now what we can do is, say you want to change the color, you can kind of just stick it on normal, and then it'll place it between the subject and the background. So pretty easy. Now, in terms of some other cool little effects you can do to add on top of this, let me show you the original artwork again. So let's bring in some of this paper texture. Now, there's a great site where you can get some really awesome preset stuff for this. There's a site called filmlooks.com, and on that site they have some really cool film overlay stuff, but they also have some of these free paper textures as well as free poster templates, which are super awesome. I just kind of stumbled across this. This isn't sponsored at all, so I'll leave a link below here. You can download these movie templates, and these just have some really awesome, amazing textures, completely free, and just look at the awesome design in here. You get some really nice stuff. Now, I wouldn't completely just take one of these unless you're just trying to maybe practice or do it for fun, but you can definitely take some of the elements here and use them for yourself. So let's hop back into Photoshop. Let's go to File, Open. Sometimes it might say not valid. It depends on your Photoshop version, I think. It says that for some of these files, but for other ones, it lets me open up fine. So that may just be an issue for me. I'm not sure. Let's open it up, check out what they have here, and then maybe grab some of those cool vintage elements that they used. So for example, as you can see, old paper filters is in a folder right here. Control C, Control V just to paste that over there, and now you automatically have that applied onto your project, which is pretty cool. Let's maybe open up another one. So I opened up this Cyborg Supremacy one. Let's grab that paper overlay. Control V to paste that. This looks super sick. So I'll maybe drag this up. I like kind of showing a little bit of background here. And also what you're going to want to do is drag these above your subject layer so that it's going on top of it and affecting it. And if you don't like how that looks, you can always select it, lower the opacity a bit, or you can take your eraser tool and maybe lower the opacity of your eraser. You're gonna have to open up the actual folder and select it, and then you can just erase where you don't want it to affect. So that's how you can create this sick look. Now, like I said, the whole thing I'm trying to get across in every single one of my videos isn't just to copy exactly step for step for what I'm showing you. It's to learn from what I'm showing you and then apply that into your own individuality, your own creativity to make some cool stuff. So use these methods, try and maybe switch it around, use a different texture, change around the colors, change around the paper texture, change around the 3D model that you use. There's a bunch you can do to switch it around. But being able to differentiate from just copying and pasting a tutorial and being able to learn from a tutorial is a huge thing that you guys need to learn, because it'll help you step up a huge amount in your skill level, and it'll just be a great benefit for you. Now, to tie this all up, I'm going to just show you how to apply some other little color looks. We talked about the hue saturation, which is awesome for changing around the actual looks of your subject. Let me show you how to tie it all up and add your own little color filter or your LUT. So you click down here on your adjustment button and you go down to color lookup, and then for all my people who are OGs of the channel, you guys should have your Lumetri folder or know how to access LUTs. If you don't, go ahead and just look up Adobe LUT, which stands for lookup table, which is basically like an Instagram color filter. For all my people who do know how to do it, or if you have Premiere installed, if you have some LUTs installed, there's a bunch of free ones out there. You go to your PC, open up your hard drive, go to program files, Adobe Premiere Pro. This is where mine is saved, at least. You can find wherever any other ones are. Lumetri, LUTs, Creative. And these are all my LUTs that I use for my actual videos that I create. So I can go ahead and apply any of these. So this Batman vs Superman one, this is to get some nice cinematic stuff. And you can lower the opacity just to maybe not apply as much onto there. Another little element, if you want to add more to the background, guys, just to show you some little Photoshop finesse tips, just look up something like, I just looked up Japanese 80s text. We're not just going to copy and paste this person's art into our project. We're going to copy the image and we're going to take this little text part out. So Control V, Control T just to resize that. Let's take our selector tool, and you can do this with a bunch of different images or text, whatever it is. Of course, you can make your own text. Let's Control J with that selection, and then we can just hide or delete this main part. And then with this little guy here, Control T, place that in the background, and then use your blending modes, guys. So click this little drop down and then mess around here, and you'll eventually, I'm using my arrow keys, you'll eventually find one that snaps onto place. So lighter color. Another little quick tip, say you maybe want to make these glow a little bit more, or maybe you want to change around the goggles. You can make a new layer. Obviously, just click this little page here, and then within this layer, let's select our brush. You want to make these little guys glow down here. You can go ahead and change, you can select the color that we have. So this is pretty orange, and with this copy, change that to linear dodge add, and that'll add this nice, really cool glow. And if it's too much, you can of course lower the opacity. The key, I think, to really making a nice final product is just spend a lot of time tweaking it. That's such an important part. Have patience, enjoy the process of it. But there you go. That's basically just showing you all the steps. So everything from creating the model, texturing it, lighting it, bring it into Photoshop, and then all the in between. I hope that you guys did learn something new. I hope that you enjoyed this. Like I said before, take these steps, apply your own individuality onto it, change it up, tweet me or send it to me on Instagram what you guys want, what you guys make with this. I really would be super happy to see what you do. My Instagram and my Twitter will be down in the description for you to check out. Make sure you guys give me a follow. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if you did enjoy. Thank you guys so much for all the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one.